Rosalind smelled of sweet dust and ripening dusk. The vineyard terraces clung to the hills like green veins, pulsing quietly beneath the twin suns of Ardèche. 4. Wind combed through the grapevines, stirring silver-green leaves into soft murmurs that could be mistaken for voices if you let yourself believe in such things. Celine never did. Or rather, she tried not to. She walked the narrow stone path between rows of fruit-heavy vines, her basket swaying against her hip. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel, the hem of her sun-bleached skirt brushing against her legs. A woven hat shaded her face, though strands of dark hair curled rebelliously beneath it. She carried clippers in one hand, stained red from a morning of pruning. This was her land, a stretch of forgotten paradise handed down through 3 quiet generations. The town of Rosalind lay just beyond the ridge, its clustered homes built from pale wood and solar tile, clustered like birds' nests along the hill's gentle curve. Most here lived by the cycle of the vines. They harvested. They pressed. They bottled. They hoped the traders would come. And they feared change. Celine was 24. Old enough to be called a woman, young enough for the village matrons to still call her child when they thought she wasn't listening. She lived alone in her grandmother's house, a quiet structure carved into the slope, where grape leaves grew across the roof like a second skin. Her hands were calloused. Her voice was soft. Her dreams, though few would guess, were anything but small. It was early dusk when she heard the rustle. Not the breeze. Not a bird. A sound like something heavy moving through the vineyard edge, near the wild vine wall where old plants grew twisted and feral. Celine froze, clippers raised. Another rustle. A pained grunt. Heart fluttering, she stepped off the path, pushing aside overgrown branches. Her boots sank slightly into the loam. Beyond the cultivated rows, the vineyard turned wild and thick, and here the light was dimmer, touched with violet shadows from the nearing twinset. Then she saw him. Half buried beneath a collapsed lattice and overgrown vines, a man. He was unconscious or close to it. His body twisted in a way that made her wince, one arm cradled against his side, the other extended weakly. His skin was pale, not sun-pale, but moon-pale. His clothes were torn, a dark tunic and trousers clinging to lean limbs. Blood, black as ink, pooled beneath his shoulder where a metal shard stuck through flesh. But that wasn't what made her breath hitch. It was the shimmer of alien tech. His wound was sealed crudely by a lattice of glowing filament. Not human. Definitely not local. She dropped to her knees. "Hey," she said, voice low. "Hey, can you hear me?" The man stirred. His eyes fluttered open, bright silver gray, unfocused. They fixed on her for half a second before his body tensed. "Don't move," she whispered. "You're hurt." He tried to rise. Failed. Gasped. She reached for the shard, then paused. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, more to herself. He coughed. A sound like cracking stone. "Please," he rasped. "They'll find me." Celine blinked. "Who?" He didn't answer. His eyes rolled back. His body went slack. Celine stared for one long second. Then, moving on instinct, she slung her basket aside and dug her arms beneath his shoulders. He wasn't heavy. Not really. But dead weight was always hard. She dragged him down the vineyard's lower slope, staying beneath the vines, her breath loud in her ears. At her cottage she bypassed the front door and instead pulled him into the root cellar beneath the back porch. It smelled of dust and cool earth. She laid him on a stack of flattened old crates, fetched water, and stripped away the ruined shirt. What she found beneath made her breath catch again. Not just the wound. Scars. Dozens. Pale lines crossing his torso, some old and faint, others newer. This was not a farmer. Not a merchant. Not a man anyone from Rosalind would claim. He was something else. And she had just brought him into her home. The storm arrived without warning. Rosalind's skies, once clear and pale gold, had turned sickly gray by midday. Wind curled through the vineyard terraces, rattling the vines and shaking ripe clusters loose. Rain fell in sudden curtains, sharp and fast, turning soil into mud and pathways into rivulets. Celine stood in the doorway of the root cellar, cloak soaked through, arms crossed against her chest. Inside, Callian was still resting on the cot she'd fashioned from old wine barrels and faded linens. His face, normally pinched with pain, had begun to soften. The fever had broken. He'd been conscious for 2 days now. Speaking, barely. Eating, even less. But his eyes tracked her now. With wary attentiveness. Celine stepped inside, dropping her wet cloak near the door. Storm came early. Callian's voice was a whisper. They always do on this moon. She paused, studying him. You've been here before. He didn't answer immediately. Then, a long time ago. She knelt beside him, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. You were nearly dead when I found you. Still might be if I hadn't pulled that shard out. Callian stared at the low ceiling beams. I owe you. Don't say that yet, she murmured. You haven't even told me your name. A beat passed. Then, finally, Callian. It rolled off his tongue like a secret not meant to be heard aloud. Celine smiled faintly. I'm Celine. He nodded, once. I know. Her brow furrowed. What? Your name's on the wine labels, he said, lips twitching with the ghost of a smile. And the crates in the cellar. She blinked. You were conscious that whole time. Enough to know you work hard. And that you talk to your vines when you think no one's listening. Color touched her cheeks. They grow better when I do. Maybe they like your voice. Celine looked away. Her hands fidgeted with a folded cloth. You said someone was after you. Who? Callian's expression darkened. You wouldn't believe me. Try me. He shifted slowly, wincing. Do you know who Ambassador Lorthan was? Was, she echoed. Yes. He visited Rosalind once. A few years back. The traders always said he was our best hope for a trade pact with the outer settlements. Then he was murdered. Callian exhaled slowly. They say I did it. Silence. Only the storm outside dared to speak. Celine stared at him. You. That's why they were chasing me. Not just soldiers. Not just bounty hunters. But the Directorate's private agents. And some of Lorthan's loyalists. They want my head, not justice. Celine shook her head slowly. But why? Why would you kill him? I didn't, Callian said. His voice was soft but cold, the kind of cold that settles into old wounds. I was trying to stop something. A plan Lorthan had in motion. Something about dissolving the treaty lines between species colonies. I found documents. Communications. Proof. I brought them to the wrong person. And that person gave me up. She felt a chill crawl across her arms. You were framed. He nodded. And now anyone who helps me is considered a traitor. Celine stared at him a long time. The rain eased into a slow patter. I believe you. Callian blinked. Why? Because your eyes don't lie. And because no one who's lived through pain the way you have would be cruel by choice. They sat in silence again. When she rose to her feet, he reached out, gently grasping her wrist. Don't let them find me. Please. She covered his hand with hers. They won't. But someone else was watching. From the hillside above the vineyard, behind the cover of a leaning fig tree, Merith held his field scope steady. The lens glowed a dull green in the fog. He saw Celine vanish into the cellar. Saw movement beneath the stairs. Meredith frowned. He'd loved Celine since they were 12. Since they chased mothlights by the river and snuck into the old barn to watch meteor storms. But she had grown distant these past years. More stubborn. More secretive. And now she was hiding something. Someone. He tapped the scope and snapped a quick image. Then slid the device back into his satchel. The Colonial Watch would want to see this. They always paid for names. The next morning dawned strangely bright. The storm had swept the skies clean, and sunlight spilled like warm honey across the vineyard. Celine stepped into the cellar with a tray of tea and hard bread. Callian was sitting up now, shirtless, the bandage around his ribs neat and clean. She tried not to look at the scars again. Tried. "Smells good," he murmured. "It's bitter leaf," she said. "Not real tea, but close." He took a careful sip, then gave her a grateful nod. "How far are we from the trade road?" "Far enough," Celine said. "But someone always comes looking, eventually." He set the cup down. "I need to leave. Before I bring danger to you." She reached for his shoulder. "You're not strong enough. Give it another day. Just one." Their eyes met. Neither looked away. And then, with the kind of tentative bravery that lives only in stolen moments, she leaned forward and brushed her lips lightly across his. A whisper of warmth. "You're not alone anymore," she said. Neither of them noticed the shimmer of red light blinking faintly from the ridge. The moon above Ardèche fractured like a scar through the sky. At night, its split face glowed in twin pieces, the great rift visible even from the low hills of Rosalène. To many, it was a symbol of old wars, old gods, and even older betrayals. For Celine, it now marked the border between life before and life after. The vineyard was gone. She and Callian had fled under cover of darkness, using forgotten goat paths through the ravine east of the village. The soldiers had come fast, shadows in black armor with bright insignias and scanning drones. Meredith must have told them. She didn't blame him. Not fully. Not yet. They moved by night, resting by day in cave mouths and under dense canopies of flora glowing with faint bioluminescence. Celine's muscles ached. Her breath came hard. But she didn't stop. Callian, still weakened from his injuries, moved slower. But his eyes had sharpened. He led now, whispering old names of terrain and forgotten trails. He knew these hills in a way that unnerved her. On the fourth day, they came to the crater. It was vast. A wound in the land, rimmed by ancient pylons long since toppled. Metal jutted from the stone like bones from an open grave. "What is this place?" she asked, breath misting in the chill air. Callian looked down across the crater rim, into the broken valley below. A peace site. One of the first. Humans and non-humans met here, generations ago. My people called it Valcareth. The House of Tethering. Celine turned. "Your people." He said nothing. She didn't push. She was beginning to see it anyway, the odd silver gray of his irises, the way his wounds healed faster than they should, the scars shaped like ritual marks. He wasn't just a fugitive. He wasn't just from off-world. He wasn't entirely human. They descended the slope slowly, passing vines that grew through broken terminals and tablets that no longer glowed. At the heart of the crater, beneath a cracked dome of metal and stone, lay the archive. A half-buried structure, fused by age and time. Callian pressed his hand to a sensor pad near the door. It blinked once, then turned green. Celine blinked. "How?" "I was here once," he said quietly. "A long time ago. With my mother." They stepped inside. The interior was vast and cold, filled with rows of glass chambers and sealed consoles. Blue lights flickered to life, casting ghost shadows. Celine wandered down an aisle of inert consoles, brushing dust from one of the screens. These are diplomatic records, Callian said behind her. Before the war. Before the treaties were erased. Celine turned to him. And you think they still hold something useful? He knelt beside a cracked pedestal. From his satchel, he pulled a small triangular chip. Inserted it. A hum. Then a voice. Mechanical. Genderless. Diplomat Lorthan, timestamp 27.4.9. Meeting log, reclassification protocols. Celine stepped closer. Play full log, Callian commanded. The voice continued. Initiated subterfuge against border colony treaties. Mission, provoke interspecies conflict to reinstate military jurisdiction under directorate governance. Falsified attacks to be staged. The log ended in static. Celine felt her knees go weak. This is real. Callian stood. His face was hard. Proof. They need to hear this. Who? The galaxy. They found the old comm relay at the edge of the crater, an ancient transmitter tower, tilted but still half-functional. Callian climbed the frame, repaired a power link using parts from his satchel, and connected the log chip. Celine stood below, breath catching in her throat. If we do this, we can never go back. He looked down at her. We already can't. He activated the signal. The file transmitted across old open-band pirate frequencies, channels still used by independent traders, smugglers, and information networks the Directorate could not erase. And across the fractured moon, someone was listening. That night, they lay together in the ruins. It wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. Celine's hands trembled as she brushed her fingers along the line of his collarbone, tracing the edges of scars and old pain. Callian, silent and steady, leaned into her touch like a man long denied gentleness. Their kiss was slow. Then it deepened. When they fell asleep, limbs tangled, the cracked dome above them framed the moon like a guardian eye. They were fugitives. But they were not alone. The message spread like dry flame across the nether channels. Within hours of its release, the truth reached outlaws, free traders, and colonies too small to be censored. Lorthan's voice, clipped and emotionless, described a manufactured war. A betrayal that would have swept entire species into engineered chaos. It was the proof that many had suspected, but few had dared to hope existed. But for Celine and Callian, proof came with a price. They returned to Rosalind 6 days after the transmission. Or rather, what was left of it. The vineyards were blackened. Vines burned to stumps. The hill paths were scorched with plasma fire. Houses had been torn open, belongings scattered across the mud like the aftermath of a hurricane. Celine fell to her knees on the ridge above the village, her hand clasped over her mouth. The air still smelled of smoke. Behind her, Callian stood silent, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. He'd known. Or guessed. The Directorate didn't forgive rebellion. Even rebellion made of words. They blamed them, she whispered. Blamed the whole town for hiding us. She descended in a half-run, stumbling through ash and shattered glass. The main square was gutted. The fountain had collapsed. A child's toy floated in a pool of brackish water, spinning slowly. Doors hung loose on hinges. Celine called out names, her voice hoarse with smoke and grief. Meredith, she shouted. Mrs. Endo. Tomas. A voice answered. Weak. Coughing. Celine. She turned and saw him. Meredith. Covered in soot, leaning against a cracked support beam near the cellar steps of her grandmother's home. She ran to him, dropped beside him. You're alive. He coughed again. Not for long. No, she said fiercely, opening her satchel, pulling out a vial. You're going to drink this. He pushed it away. No. Listen. Celine held his hand. It trembled. I didn't mean for this, he said. I thought they'd arrest you. Question him. I didn't know they'd burn everything. She said nothing. Just gripped his hand tighter. They made everyone line up, Meredith continued. Said someone had betrayed the directorate. That someone had leaked classified files. When no one confessed, they opened fire. Celine sobbed once, quietly. I tried to stop them, Meredith said. I begged them. They shot Mr. Cal. He was just holding a grapevine in his hands. Just pruning it like always. He was crying now. So was she. I told them I gave you up, he said. They didn't care. Meredith's eyes grew distant. Then still. Celine held his hand until it went cold. They buried the dead as best they could. 29 graves. Some with names. Some with only broken tools placed above them. It took 3 days. Callian worked beside her in silence, his face grim, his hands blistered. On the 4th day, survivors emerged from the forest. 3. Then 7. Then a dozen. They had hidden in the limestone caves near the riverbank. A woman named Lessa. An old man named Joran. 2 children, siblings, who never let go of each other's hands. Celine gathered them beneath the half-burnt grape arbor. She showed them the recording. They listened in silence. When it ended, she stood. They burned our homes because we heard the truth. What happens next is up to us. The people of Rosalene, tired and raw, nodded. Even grief couldn't bury fire. Word spread. Other villages sent messengers. Some sent food. Others sent fighters. And then one morning, the horizon flickered with ships. Not directorate. Independent transports. Traders. Smugglers. A pirate frigate from the old resistance. They had heard the broadcast. They brought news. Other settlements had revolted. Protests in the skies of Junder's Reach. Riots across the ice colonies. A freighter dock explosion at Norin's Belt. Something had cracked. And out of that crack came a reckoning. Celine stood on a flat rock above the ruins, her cloak whipping in the wind. Callian stood beside her. Below, a gathering army. Not in uniform. Not polished. But determined. They want to silence you, he said quietly. Then I'll shout louder, she said. He took her hand. You make me believe, he said. In what? In hope. The first battle came at dawn. The dawn came red. Not from sunrise, but from fire. Above the ridge, directorate carriers loomed like black beetles, their engines silent, their cannons warm. They had come not just to finish the rebels but to erase them. Erase Rosalene, erase the voice that had threatened to unmake their carefully engineered peace. Celine stood at the front line, cloak tossed aside. She wore only her simple vineyard clothes, but her eyes burned brighter than any soldier's torch. Callian stood beside her. Not behind. Beside. His rifle was old, patched together from different worlds. His blood was still healing from the last skirmish. But his spine was straight. He looked at her, as if trying to memorize her. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I do, he replied. But not alone. The rebels fought like those with nothing left to lose. And at first, they held. The directorate's lines buckled. The terrain was on the rebels' side. Hills, ruins, scorched fields, places that knew Celine's people better than any topographic scan ever could. Callian led a flank down the old wine tunnels, emerging behind enemy lines like a phantom. Celine coordinated runners, medical relief, and fire routes. She became what the village never expected of her. A general. For hours, they held. But the directorate had reinforcements. Heavy mechs. Bioscout drones. Atmospheric strike cruisers. And by sunset, they were losing. Celine's leg bled from a grazing shot. Her lungs burned with ash. Callian had disappeared in the haze. Then the broadcast came. From the skies. Across every directorate channel, a voice spoke, one that froze the generals mid-command. This is Callian Vey of the Ketheri line. Son of Ilan Vey. Former consulate attaché to House Dal. I have released proof of directorate war crimes and diplomatic assassinations. I am en route to your prime tribunal station. I surrender myself willingly. A pause. I ask only that the girl they call Celine be spared. She has done nothing but try to heal. I will answer for all. But she must live. Celine, lying under a collapsed vine trellis, screamed into the wind. No. They let her live. She was arrested. Questioned. Shipped to a holding station on the mining moon Kale 3. But they didn't kill her. Weeks passed. Then a trial was announced. Broadcast publicly. Callian, shackled but unbowed, stood on a digital dais surrounded by directorate elites. The tribunal chamber was shaped like a blade, all sharp edges and silence. Celine was called as witness. She stepped forward. Spoke. Not loudly. But clearly. About the vineyard. The crater. The archive. The transmission. The graves. Merith. The lies. The galaxy listened. And in the end, it believed. The tribunal collapsed. Protests erupted across core systems. The directorate fractured. Colonies seceded. A new pact was written. Not in blood. But in truth. 1 year later, the vineyard was green again. The soil still smelled faintly of ash, but life had returned. New vines. New growth. And in the center, a statue, a woman standing beside a man, both reaching for the sky, hands not holding weapons, but each other. Celine stood at the roots of the statue, a trowel in her hand. Keep the roots loose, said a voice behind her. She turned. He was thinner. His hair had grayed. But he was free. Callian. They didn't speak for a moment. Just held each other. Then, in the shade of the rebuilt arbor, they sat. They didn't speak of war. They spoke of soil. Of grapes. Of names for vines. Of a child on the way. Because love, like a vineyard, needed time. And rain. And forgiveness. And Celine knew one truth now more than anything. Her crime had been love. But love, in the end, was the only thing worth defying the world for. And the vines bloomed again. Finis. The morning was soft. Birds sang in the vineyard rose again, and dew clung to the young green grapes like tears the earth had decided to keep. Celine knelt at the base of a narrow trellis, her belly round with new life, her hands gently shaping the soil. Each movement was slow, measured, peaceful. Above her, the sky was so clear it looked like polished glass. Peace had returned to Rosalind. But peace, Celine knew, was not the same as stillness. In the house atop the hill, Callian was speaking to a diplomat from the fringe colonies. She heard their low voices drifting out across the vines. Occasionally, Callian paused, as if trying to find the right word that would not sound like a wound. Celine straightened, wiping her hands clean on a cloth. Then she turned to the small box resting in the shade nearby. "Did you hear that, little one?" she said softly, rubbing her belly. "Your father is negotiating with a woman who once tried to kill him. Funny how things turn out." She smiled. But part of her knew the world wasn't done with them yet. The first sign came with the ship. Not a trading vessel. Not an official diplomatic courier. A relic. Rusted, battered, but still flying. It docked at the Rosalind outpost without notice, its transponder codes flagged as non-identified, former rebel affiliate. Celine heard the hum of it from the fields and felt her breath catch. By the time she reached the outpost, Callian was already standing on the platform, arms crossed. The ship's doors opened. And a man stepped out. Broad-shouldered. Dressed in civilian flight leathers. But his eyes, they were the color of old fire. Callian the man said. Callian stiffened. I thought you were dead. I was supposed to be, the man said. But directorate prisons are sloppy when they fall. Celine stepped beside her husband. Who is he? The man inclined his head. Raul Soren. Former lieutenant in the resistance. Friend. Brother in arms. And I've come because it's starting again. Over the next days, they met under the vineyard arbor. Raul brought warnings of rising directorate splinters in the outer quadrants, generals who had escaped tribunal justice, now rallying support in the name of order. He spoke of coded broadcasts intercepted along deep space channels, whispers of old plans awakening. Celine listened in silence. Callian sat with his head bowed, one hand on the table, the other clenched in a quiet fist. I thought it was over, he said. It was never going to be over, Raul replied. Not unless we finish it completely. Celine finally spoke. And what does that mean? Raul looked at her, his expression grim. It means we need to root out every last directorate stronghold. Tear them from their bunkers. End them. This time, not with words. Callian looked up. I won't become what they were. I won't trade one tyranny for another. No, Raul agreed. But you will have to lead again. Celine rose, hands on her hips. We have a child coming. I will not raise them in blood. Raul looked between them. Then quietly said, then don't fight for yourselves. Fight for them. The debates lasted days. Callian argued with old allies over encrypted comms. Celine wrote open letters to colony leaders, urging unity without violence. Across the system, whispers grew. Some colonies sided with them. Others resisted. Fringe factions turned militant. And then one morning, a warning drone landed in the vineyard. A message blinked on the small holoscreen. Redirective fleet en route. Target, Rosalind. Time to contact, 72 hours. Celine didn't panic. She called every friend they had. By dusk, 5 transports had landed. Medical staff. Former soldiers. Engineers. Families from neighboring colonies. All coming to help defend the place that had become more than a symbol. A promise. The vineyard, once a quiet cradle of tradition, now became a fortress of hope. But not every defense was made of walls. Celine stood at the edge of the southern terrace, wind in her hair, a growing life within her, and a stubborn fire in her soul. She would not let them take this again. The enemy arrived cloaked in silence. No speeches. No warnings. Just ships descending in black lines like the shadow of death. But this time, Rosalind did not tremble. Callian took command. He was no longer a fugitive, but a name spoken across rebel worlds with respect. His orders were precise. Mercy where possible. Defense without vengeance. Celine remained in the central field, directing safe zones, medical posts, and extraction paths. Her fingers never touched a weapon. But her voice held the power to keep others alive. The first assault hit the western ridge. Explosions shook the old stone watchtower. But it did not fall. The rebels held. The second wave came with sonic disruptors and orbital flash rounds. But the vineyard survived. And on the third day, when the enemy's last transport was grounded, and the skies were again filled with birds instead of bombs, Celine walked through the vines hand in hand with Callian. Together, they had not destroyed their enemies. They had outlasted them. Peace came. True peace. Not because the war ended, but because the world changed. Because people remembered love was worth more than conquest. And it began in a vineyard, where a healer had once reached out her hand to a wounded fugitive. Years later, when their daughter was old enough to walk the vineyard rows on her own, she asked her mother what all the statues were for. Celine smiled and said, "They're reminders." "Of war?" the girl asked. "No," Celine said. "Of how we chose to grow something instead." And beneath the twin suns, the vines grew taller. Their roots deeper than blood. Their fruit sweeter than vengeance. And love, the kind that defied governments, bullets, and time, remained the richest harvest of all. Finis.